Good morning. Welcome to Park Talks, everyone. This is Daniel. Park it, and let's talk about it. There is much to be heard in the silence of life. Silence. I've heard it said, silence is golden. Let's kind of excavate that area. Reflecting back on this weekend. This weekend in town, near where we live, was a festival. And this is where we normally record Park Talks. So, looking back from Thursday through Monday of the Memorial Weekend, we were extremely busy down at this festival. Volunteering at different booths, and our youngest was in band camp, or with band, and there was a lot of commitments there. So we're back and forth in town a lot. And one thing that neither myself or my wife had much of this weekend was quiet time, silence, just time to unwind personally together. We were working a lot together, but mind you, we were collectively getting stuff done for people. Some non-for-profits needed some assistance. By Sunday afternoon, we had about a 4-hour break, and we were getting a little tired. And kind of touched off a little heat between the two of us. As we've talked about before in Park Talks, that tired is one of the supporting elements of anger. And it didn't get out of control, but it got a little sharp. And we realized that we both needed some time apart. So we had an opportunity to kind of get alone. And just 20, 30 minutes. Just relax. Just clear our head of the day. Refresh. By the time we got home, things had quieted down quite a bit. We were able to spend a little quality time together. Got to bed, got a good night's sleep. In the morning, Monday morning came with a early awakening. We had some scheduled things with the parade. We needed to get up and get moving. And we were able to hit the ground with a little bit of excitement. And I believe it's because we both recognized that we needed some silence. And we got that not just for ourselves, but we also got it together. So let's talk about that silence. I find that it's very important. We're going to touch not only on the negative or the positive of silence, but also the negative of it, of long-term silence. It has been shown in some professionals to have negative effects. But I believe you'll conclude the same place I did by the end of today's talk. Silence is where your thoughts are at. So we can steer good or bad if you allow it. Here we go. Isaiah 53:7. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is sent. So he opened not his mouth. If you don't open your mouth and say anything, you're silent. You're quiet. Christ didn't defend his actions, and this was written about back in Isaiah before Christ even walked the face of the earth. Yet when somebody would offer us an offense or a contentious thoughts or a change in schedule even, people tend to steer to quaking and anger and getting mad real all of a sudden. Could it be that a lot of people these days, like what we were this weekend, are just absolutely overpressed by all the things going on around them, and they just can't get away from the noise? There's no silence. And then when silence does show up, it's used as a weapon. How do you weaponize silence? Say something sharp to somebody, and then don't respond to anything else for a day or two or three. And just allow those last few words that you guys had to possibly be the last few words you two might ever have. Silence in long term, used as when weaponized, can bring on death. Death of a relationship, death of emotions, death of feelings, death of future. Silence can be weaponized, and when it is, it hurts. Silence can also be what heals, like we've demonstrated. The silence actually is what was needed to heal our relationship. Moses He had to go up into the mountains to find silence. I mean, he had all the Israelites complaining and wandering and dragging through the desert. This ain't good enough and that ain't good enough. We should have just stayed back there and eaten this and that. Made bricks without straw. But Moses, he had to get out. And he realized when he went up into the mountain, I don't think that God literally said, hey, come up here and I'll give you 10 commandments to follow. I think Moses just got out of there and he's like, man, I got to go chill with God for a little while. I need some silence. The Gospels, they tell us that Jesus would go off at times for days. At one time over a month, it was 40 days to fast and pray. How many of us even have 40 minutes of silence during a week? You can't get to 40 minutes in a week. I wonder how you could get to 40 days. In the silence, we learn about Jesus being tempted several different times. If he would have accepted the temptation, then his silence would have led to a negative outcome, in my book. But during his silent time, the Word of God was communicating with the one true God, so that when he needed God, the Word of God is what would pour out of him. See how that works? 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the Word of God. That way, when there is something that has to be said, it's truth. Because as we've established in Park Talks on countless times, that the only real truth that we can depend on comes out of the Word of God. It's in the silence of this world that we can hear from God the best. Job, he sat alone in the ashes. Remember, his friends had to join him in the ashes, which means he was there alone, praying. Daniel got alone in his room, opened the east windows, knelt and prayed. Nobody else, alone. The reason that they knew that Daniel was praying was because he opened the windows of his room to the east. And all they had to do was look up and see the windows were open, and guess what Daniel was doing? When them windows were open, that dude's on his knees. Right. He didn't need people around. They knew. John the Baptist lived alone while baptizing, hearing from God. Joshua, he was alone in the belly of the fish, cried out to God. He was alone. David, a young shepherd boy out in the field, bunch of sheep, harp, bears, lions, tigers, oh my. But he was alone. He had time to talk to God. Why do you think God chose him as a king? Because David was out there spending time alone in meditative thought, playing music, tending the sheep, taking care of his father's business. It was Jesse who owned the sheep, not David. David was a teenager. They didn't own businesses back then. They still don't, I don't think. He hadn't even whooped a giant alone. The Navy SEALs kind of have a saying. It goes something like this. It's not exactly, but it says, during the conflict, do we rise? Do we rise to the opportunity, or do we sink to the level of our training? I would caveat that by asking this. Is it the training that we sink to, or is it the level of our thought? Because as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Also, from the depths of the heart, the mouth speaks. Thinking is found in the silence. Silence, still calm, a calm, still voice, wherever you want to find it. Let's look at 1 Kings 19, 11, 13, where there was a stillness. And he said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke it to pieces, the rocks before the Lord, and the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. and after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave, and behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" It was in the stillness. It was in the calmness. It was in the low whisper. In a cave, what radio station was playing? What YouTube site? What Twitter feed? What Facebook? Sorry, wasn't there. What TV station? I'm curious if we haven't polluted our input sources, our eyes and ears, for so long with so much of this pre-recorded garbage. Some of the pre-recorded music, reruns on TV. If you have a movie that you've watched, and you watch, and you watch, and you watch, I understand it's your favorite movie. I understand it's a great movie. But you know the end when you hit play. What new is happening during that hour, hour and a half? What investment are you getting? I know. It's entertaining. It's fun. We assign that to labels. The Blueberry Festival, it was fun. We assign fun to that. We could also assign miserable to that. We have to slow down. Now, in the silence, I've challenged a lot of people to think about this. I have a question relating to music. I've asked many people to think about this one question, and I've had 100% incorrect responses. Let's see how you do. And answer this for yourself. Pay attention. The question is this: where does the music lie in the music score? Where's it at? Here's your choices. Is it in the note, or is it in the silence? Now again, let me repeat. I've had a 100% inaccurate response. With that, a wise man would make a guess. The response I most generally receive is that the music is in the note. I challenge this. I believe the music is found in the silence. It's hidden in the silence, or the rest. In music, we call it. Now, with most people I've asked face-to-face and seen the confused look on their face, they're trying to figure out how I can find music in silence. So I offer by humming one long note that lasts about one breath, maybe two. After a moment, getting a fresh breath, I will follow with the same note in a rhythmic, silent break or a rest, not changing the note, just the length of the pause. It is at that time the look on their face changes, and they find that the true music is hidden in the silence and not the note. The note is just a guide to the next natural pause of silence. One of the components of listening is silence. When somebody is listening to music, they are actually listening for the silence between the notes. So if listening is in the silence, I understand a lot of people's concept is, well, if I shut the noise off around me, I will have silence. I would challenge with, what if you shut the noise off inside of you? Stop digging around for the next responsitory action to somebody's communication point. Stop searching your head for a historical point that would connect you to that person, or a story better or worse than theirs. Disconnect from those in conversation. When somebody's talking to you, do your best to stay silent on the inside. Listen to emphasize and to understand. Silence the voices when you're listening. It's in the silence. It's where the head and the heart can unite. When those two unite, two of the most powerful sources in the entire world, the head and the heart, when they unite, the power that comes out of a person. And it may just be the power of their silence. Delicate, strong silence. In this silence, we also find that there is healing. There's healing from the past, the present. In silence, concerns are dissolved, fears go away, anxieties flutter off. Worries just kind of wash off your back. There's no stress in silence. This is where the body can heal itself. In this silence, there's also balance. There's no anger, no blame, no confusion, doubt, no hate, judgment, pain. There's no self, no tension. It is here in the silence where we find peace, happiness, joy, gentleness, self-control. Also, we challenge thoughts, beliefs, feelings, all these that control or balance our emotions, our actions, and our words. For example, just settle down in the silence. In the silence, there's listening, there's learning, and there's loving. Taking enough time for yourself to love yourself. Listen to just the wind around you if you need to. You probably hear it in the recording. It's in the silence where many people avoid. They don't want to be in the silence for fear of finding their self. The fear of finding doubt or worry about not good enough or not perfect enough. Or if I only would have, should have, could have. They're stuck in that past loop. Now, on the opposite of silence, the negative side, this can be where the not good enough, the self-doubt, the professionals even say insanity can derive from too much silence. When you work in a prison system, a person's already locked up for bad behavior. And when you put them in solitary confinement, that's just because while they were locked up for bad behavior, it got worse. And there's actually long-term limits of how long somebody can be kept in isolation without human contact. We can have silence in a group, in a multitude of people, simply by just slowing our mind down, slowing our thoughts down, taking some very deep breaths. I prefer to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. If you do that a couple times a day, it'll help you settle down inside. Another area of silence is in conversation, speech, or as we mentioned, a piece of music. It's used for reflection, anticipation, and it's used for creativity. I also believe it's in the silence where there's room for God to speak to us. I'm curious if there's room in everybody's life for God to speak to them. Or if he says, I'll just open his Bible and read a few pieces. That's okay. But what if he wants to speak to you through nature, through other people, through his own voice, like he did with Elijah? Psalms 19:14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation, this is the silence of my heart, be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Let's back up in this one real quick. And the meditation of my heart. Those are thoughts overlapped with what's in your heart, your emotions. Now, what do you want them to be? Acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. In Psalms 49:3, my mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. One thing I've came to realize through writing this, and I'm glad that it was opened up in my thoughts, and that is, on the other side of silence, we will generally find peace, calm, joy, happiness. We'll be settled down inside. Our voice tones will be very relaxed. We'll be ready for what's coming next. Every day brings a new adventure. And if we don't spend time in some silence, clearing yesterday's adventure out of the way, it's easy to get lost in the busyness of the world. I challenge everybody this week. Find a little time each day, be it 10 minutes. Start with 20 minutes. Start with 40 seconds. Find a way to silence the world around you, just for a little peace. Close your eyes if you can. Take your thoughts to your favorite place where you've been. Be it by the creek somewhere, be it out in the woods. Go somewhere that's really peaceful, that you can just enjoy nature in your mind. If you can get there physically, great. But go there in your mind. Spend a few minutes there. Soak it in. It was built for you. Hey guys, this is Daniel with Park Talks. Thank you for joining us this week. Be blessed, everybody.